Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Today, I'm going to be talking about feminist food justice, overcoming intersectional inequities in U.S. and international food systems. First, I'm going to explain why we're coming up with this concept of feminist food justice. There are a number of issues, three in particular. First is that food insecurity is increasing around the globe. 2 billion people lack access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food. The COVID pandemic adds significantly to the number of undernourished people in the world due to health, social, and economic impacts. Food insecurity is not confined to the global South. I know at this meeting, we're trying to link international development and domestic issues. So the US saw more than 6 million new recipients of food assistance benefits in the first 3 months of the pandemic, with 1 out of every 8 Americans receiving food benefits. In January 2021, 1 in 7 adults in the US reported that their households do not have enough food to eat. There's also a stark decline in agrobiodiversity. Since 1900, 75% of the genetic diversity of crops has been lost. Scientists estimate that by 2025, another 60,000 plant species will be lost. 90% of the world's caloric intake comes from just 20 plant species. And gender is an important issue in preserving agrobiodiversity. Local knowledge is essential for saving seeds and providing diverse diets. And in many cultures around the world, women are the main seed savers and conservers of biodiversity. The impact of agrobiodiversity decline is stark. It diminishes livelihoods and farmers' adaptation strategy. It undermines the stability of food and agriculture, and it leaves communities vulnerable to climate change and other stressors. And third, women produce 40% of the world's food as farmers and workers. Unfortunately, they're discriminated against in the workforce. Women's work is often undervalued, if even seen. They have fewer resources as farmers, less land, less labor, fewer inputs and access to technology, more difficulty accessing financial services, and oftentimes no agriculture or extension education. So we're proposing, and I've worked on this idea with Anouk Patel-Campillo, a model called Feminist Food Justice, which is a conceptual framework for linking gender and agriculture researchers and practitioners in the US and internationally. The feminist food justice builds on food sovereignty and food justice movements. And in this new effort, where it's really aiming to overcome intersectional inequities in the food system. The food sovereignty movement was led and articulated by La Via Campesina in the 1990s in response to problems with the globalization of the food system. And the Nailini Declaration articulated the food sovereignty movement's platform with the meeting in Mali with attendees from over 80 countries. Interesting, the name of the declaration was inspired by a legendary peasant woman from Mali, Nailini, who excelled at farming and feeding her community. The food sovereignty is the first sentence of the food declaration of Nailini is that food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agricultural systems. Food sovereignty does take into account and cares about gender equity in rural women. La Via Campesina advocated for gender equity in the food system, saying that rural women must be granted direct and active decision-making on food and rural issues. I see one contradiction with the food sovereignty movement here, because it promotes gender equality while simultaneously promoting the traditional family farm. And we know that in most regions of the world, family farms continue to be no bastion of gender inequality, but are overwhelmingly patriarchal. So how we resolve this contradiction is not clear. Another movement that has its roots in the US is the food justice movement, which focuses on strategies for overcoming racial, gender, ethnic, and class inequalities in the food system. Food justice began in Black and communities of color with interesting roots in the civil rights movement as a road of resistance to white supremacy. Fannie Lou Hamer in the 1960s began Freedom Farmers Cooperative in the Mississippi Delta to provide alternatives for sharecroppers and tenant farmers who had lost their land due to organizing for the right to vote. The farm eventually grew to 680 acres, including all types of things, including a pig bank, community gardens, a communal kitchen, and a tool bank, and was using agriculture as a mode of resistance to white supremacy. Today, a number of organizations, such as the Black Urban Growers, BUGS, which was started in New York City by Karen Washington and others, organized to obtain urban land, to feed marginal urban communities, and to empower, especially people of color, often in urban areas. So with that background of those two movements, we're going to building on that to come up with strategies of feminist food justice. And I'm going to talk about 5 strategies that we suggest. Supporting food production at multiple scales. 2, improving working conditions for farm workers in the food chain beyond the farm gate. 3, valuing food care work that feeds family. 4, providing good food for all. And 5, gratitude. So supporting food production at multiple scales. Here we suggest 3 different scales compared to the food sovereignty movement, which is focused primarily on small farmers. We still think it's important to enhance the ability of small farmers to secure sufficient food and livelihoods. But also we think it's important, given the rise of industrial agriculture globally and in the US, is to improve the working conditions of women and men working as paid farm workers. And 3rd, to enhance the opportunities for urban agriculture. And this is oftentimes at a very small scale, even if it's a planter on someone's porch. But it's especially important for racially and ethnically marginalized communities. And urban agriculture is primarily done by women across the world. So also it's important to improve conditions for workers across the food chain. Women workers are often women of color, form the core and lowest level of workers in food processing and food service. Their jobs are often flexible, temporary, seasonal, and often the reason for this is it's cited that they have responsibility for care work and don't want to work full time. There needs to be greater enforcement of federal, state, and local equal opportunity laws for people of color, ethnic minorities, and women, and also non-citizens. It's important to raise wages for both men and women. As we see in the US, the raising wages to minimum wage to $15 an hour would mostly, some of the people who would benefit from it most would be food service workers, grocery store workers, and food processing workers. Especially during COVID, where grocery store workers, food processing workers have been considered essential workers, but they have not been protected to the extent of others. And here is a photo of migrant workers returning home to their rural villages in India when there was a shutdown because of COVID. So the 3rd strategy is to value food care work. Worldwide, women do the vast majority of food care work, and it's oftentimes this work is oftentimes undervalued. They feed their families, they feed other households, and they feed their communities. During COVID, there's a stark awareness of women's contributions to care work, especially with feeding their families. And we've seen that women are much more likely to lose their jobs and extraordinarily stressed out around the world from having to feed all of their families who are oftentimes at home. So this is emphasizing and valuing women's care work is a complex dilemma, because we're struck with how do we value women's contribution to household and local food provision without reinscribing women's traditional responsibility for food provisioning. So I have a few ideas, and hopefully this is one issue we could talk about in the question and answer session. One thing is to shake it up. Provide quality and affordable child and elder care so that women aren't doing all the work. Promote men's and boys' involvement in food care through organizations such as Men Care, that's funded by Promundo, promoted by them to have men and boys worldwide be involved in care work. And thirdly, shake up heteronormative household models that result in equitable gender divisions of labor and food security, and might have new models such as community kitchens or sharing and cooking and preparing food across households. Fourth is have good food for all. It's important to eliminate intersectional inequities in access to food. Assure food access for everyone, especially in times of crisis. And we can do this by doing creative partnerships. And I'm going to talk about a few of these partnerships that I've been involved with. At Penn State, we have the GEAR program, which links domestic and international development efforts through creative partnerships. For example, I know we're interested at this conference in linking domestic and international development efforts. So at Penn State, we have the Pennsylvania Women's Agriculture Network, which is a creative partnership between universities, NGOs, and community organizations. With over 2,000 members, we do research and outreach, and we do our programming based on the needs and desires of the rural women farmers. Most recently, we started a program to link urban and rural women farmers and gardeners, and we found that confronting racism in agriculture is a key here and not an easy task, but we've been working hard on that area. As a spinoff, well, not exactly a spinoff, but we started another women's agricultural network in Honduras with funding from USAID and the Feed the Future. It was a partnership between Penn State, Zamorano University, and AMIR, which is a community-based indigenous women's organization. We conducted farm research and farmer field schools, focusing on improving gender equity and increasing vegetable production at the same time, which was quite a feat, but we really pulled it off thanks to the work of Paige Castellanos and several other people. Another thing we've done is to have a collaborative blog on gender, food, and agriculture and coronavirus. This is a collaborative space with contributions from scholars and researchers and practitioners from across the world. We try to raise awareness about the gendered and food systems related impacts of COVID. You can visit our blog at this site. Just some examples, and we have a number of examples internationally and from the US. So internationally, some of the blogs are on women street vendors in Vietnam, indigenous rural women's organizations in Honduras, migrant farm workers and food processors in Iowa, queer farmers in the US, to name just a few. So you can visit our blog at this site, and even if you don't want to read, the photographs are just fabulous. Here's Here are women waiting in line in the Philippines to go into a market. And here's a community group in India providing food for their local communities. And the final point I want to make is gratitude. I just added this because I just saw last week Robin Wall Kimmerer talk at the Pennsylvania the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture Conference. She wrote the book Braiding Sweetgrass, which is indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teachings of plants. She's a trained plant botanist and also an indigenous woman from upstate New York. She says this: each of us comes from people who were once indigenous. Reclaim our membership and cultures of gratitude from our old relationships with the living earth, where wealth is understood to be having enough to share. Besides, gratitude makes us happy. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Marie Christie, for asking me. It's nice to be here at this conference. And I just want to end with a couple lines from a poem that Adrienne Rich wrote quite a while ago. And I wasn't thinking we would still have to be saying this at this time, but I think it's important to say it again. To feed the world is the real decision. No revolution has chosen it because that requires women to be free. Thank you, and I can ask questions. I'll take your questions. Oh, we're not in live person. Thank you.